During an exhausting battle with an autoimmune disease that had debilitated her for 4 years, 36-year-old Lindsay Carter watched her life fall apart when her husband, Isaiah, came home one cold night to announce he wanted a divorce. Claiming that life with her felt suffocating and that he still had much to enjoy, he revealed something even more devastating. He was in a relationship with a young woman, full of energy and health, someone who, in his eyes, symbolized the vibrant future Lindsay could no longer offer. But in an unexpected twist of fate, Isaiah would soon discover that his selfish decision carried an enormous price, placing him in a position he could never have imagined. Winter in Indianapolis was relentless that time of year. Snow piled up on rooftops, and icy winds cut through the skin like blades. In the modest red brick house in the Broad Ripple neighborhood, Lindsay Carter, 36, gazed at the bare trees through the living room window. It was a quiet afternoon, but her mind was far from peaceful. Her body bore the weight of exhaustion. The autoimmune disease that had plagued her for 4 years drained her energy in ways few could understand. Even the simplest tasks, climbing the stairs, preparing dinner, or even shifting positions on the couch, required disproportionate effort. But Lindsay was determined. She disliked being seen as a victim and fought daily to keep her routine as normal as possible, despite her limitations. Isaiah, her husband, was the anchor she believed kept her life stable. At 38, he exuded the confident charm of a man who knew how to navigate the world. Always well-dressed with the demeanor of a successful real estate professional, Isaiah seemed to embody the American dream. But in recent months, something had changed. Lindsay noticed his growing distance, the increasing silences, and especially his absences. That afternoon, as she waited for Isaiah to come home, Lindsay tried to push away the thoughts that hammered in her mind. It was common for him to work late, especially during contract closings, but recently his excuses sounded different, more mechanical, colder. She knew something was wrong but didn't want to admit it to herself. She loved Isaiah and believed their marriage was a strong partnership, forged through tough times. When the front door finally opened, it was past 9 p.m. Isaiah walked in carrying a stack of papers. A scent of unfamiliar perfume clung to him, mingling with the chill from outside. He didn't kiss her goodnight or ask how she was. He simply set the papers on the table and sighed deeply, as if carrying the weight of the world. "We need to talk," he said, taking off his coat. Lindsay froze. Something in his voice didn't sound right. It was direct, without hesitation, almost mechanical. Trying to hide her anxiety, she forced a smile. "Sure. About what?" Isaiah ran his hand over his face, visibly uncomfortable but resolute. "About us. About our marriage." Lindsay's heart raced. She knew this conversation was coming, but hadn't imagined it would be that night or in that way. "What do you mean by that?" Her voice trembled. Isaiah sat down in the chair across from her, but didn't meet her eyes. He stared at the floor as if reading an invisible script. When he finally spoke, his words came out sharp and cold. "I want a divorce." The air seemed to leave the room. For a moment, Lindsay thought she hadn't heard correctly. "What?" she murmured, her voice weak. Isaiah looked up, but his gaze held no compassion, only exhaustion. "I can't live like this anymore, Lindsay. I feel trapped in a life that doesn't make me happy, in a routine that suffocates me. I'm sorry, but I want to move on." "Trapped," she repeated, incredulous. "You think you're trapped? I'm the one who spends my days fighting just to get out of bed, Isaiah. I'm the one enduring constant pain and still trying to keep this marriage afloat. How can you say that?" He sighed again, but this time his tone carried impatience. "I don't want to keep sacrificing my dreams. I still have so much to enjoy in life. And I met someone." Lindsay felt as though the ground had vanished beneath her feet. The pain in her chest was almost physical. The words echoed in her mind. "I met someone, she whispered, her eyes brimming with tears. "Yes, she makes me feel alive again. And it's not just that. I can't handle this situation anymore. I don't want to be cruel, but you know this isn't fair to me." Lindsay's face flushed with anger and grief. "Unfair to you? I've given everything to this marriage, even as my health crumbled. And now you're leaving me for... Who is she? Who is this person?" Isaiah hesitated for a moment, then confessed. "She's a yoga instructor. Her name is Vanessa. She's healthy, full of energy. She makes me see the future in a way I couldn't anymore." Lindsay felt crushed. The humiliation, the abandonment, the rejection, all of it surged at once. Isaiah, however, didn't seem inclined to prolong the conversation. He stood, grabbed his things, and got straight to the point. "I'm leaving the house tonight. I'll stay at a hotel until we sort out the divorce. I hope we can handle this civilly." He left, leaving Lindsay alone, devastated and unmoored. Outside, the wind continued to howl, as if mocking her pain. She remained on the couch, her eyes fixed on the door he had just closed. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't even have the strength to wipe them away. The night felt endless. Alone, Lindsay was overwhelmed by the emptiness of a life that had just been shattered. Everything she had thought was secure, certain and solid, had been ripped from her hands. She didn't know how she would survive this, but one thing was clear: her life would never be the same again. Hook, as the night dragged on, Lindsay, still consumed by pain, gazed out the window at the distant city lights. One question hammered in her mind: how could someone who swore to love me destroy me like this? She knew the answer would come only with time, and time in that moment felt like her greatest enemy. The weeks following Isaiah's abandonment were a blur of pain and disorientation for Lindsay. Each morning, she woke with the crushing sensation that the world was collapsing around her. The house, once a sanctuary of shared memories, was now a space filled with silence, emptiness, and the constant echo of his words. "I still have so much to enjoy." Every corner of the house mocked her with memories. The kitchen table where they used to share coffee now seemed like a relic from another life. Their bedroom, with Isaiah's side of the bed empty, was a cruel reminder of the space he had left behind. Lindsay struggled to find meaning in her daily routine, but the physical exhaustion caused by her illness made everything even harder. Isaiah hadn't returned for anything beyond a few clothes and documents. He had left the rest behind, as if discarding an unwanted version of himself. Lindsay wanted to hate him, but the weight of abandonment overshadowed any other emotion. Friends and family tried to reach out, offering support, but she avoided them all. The humiliation of being left for a younger, healthier woman was too much to bear. One of the few people she couldn't push away was Emily, a co-worker. Emily was different from the others. She didn't offer solutions or motivational speeches. Instead, she brought small gestures of care: homemade soup, quick visits to drop something at the door, or simple text messages asking how Lindsay was. Reluctant at first, Lindsay began to realize she needed someone, anyone, to keep her from completely succumbing to isolation. One afternoon, while attempting to catch up on overdue work emails, Lindsay received an unexpected message on her phone. It was from an old friend who had drifted away over the years but now seemed concerned about her. "Hey, Lindsay, I just saw something I thought you should know. I don't know if you'll want to hear it, but I felt it was important. It's about Isaiah and..." "Vanessa." Lindsay hesitated before replying. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but curiosity and pain intertwined, urging her forward. "What is it?" The response came with an attached photo. It was Isaiah and Vanessa at an upscale downtown Indianapolis restaurant, smiling as if they were living the perfect fairy tale. The contrast to Lindsay's current reality hit like a punch to the stomach. Tears rolled down her face, but this time there was something else: anger. A simmering rage began to replace the apathy of the past few days. "While I'm here just trying to survive, he's out there living his best life with her?" Lindsay thought, gripping her phone tightly. That moment ignited something within her, a spark that started to transform her. For the first time since he'd left, she allowed herself to feel more than just sadness. That evening, an unexpected visitor arrived. Emily, with her warm energy, showed up unannounced, carrying a bag full of treats and a concerned expression. "I know you don't like surprises, but I thought you could use some company tonight," Emily said with an encouraging smile. Lindsay tried to protest, but gave up quickly. Truthfully, she was grateful not to face yet another night alone. As they sipped tea in the living room, Emily shared light-hearted stories from her day, trying to lift the mood. Lindsay, however, couldn't focus. After a long silence, she finally spoke. "Isaiah wants a divorce. He's with someone else," she confessed, her voice breaking. Emily set her cup down and took Lindsay's hand. "I'm so sorry, Lindsay. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't think he'd be this cruel. You don't deserve this." Emily's words were sincere, but they also stirred something inside Lindsay. She realized she was tired of being seen as a victim. She didn't want her story to end like this. "I need to get out of this," "I can't keep living like my life is over," Lindsay said with more determination than she expected. Emily smiled. "That's the spirit, and you're not alone in this. We'll find a way to turn this page." In the days that followed, Emily became a crucial support system. Lindsay began to open up more, sharing her daily struggles with the disease, the financial difficulties she faced since Isaiah's departure, and her fear of never recovering. Inspired by Lindsay's situation, Emily came up with an idea. She proposed launching a social media campaign to raise funds for Lindsay's medical treatment, which had been disrupted due to her financial struggles. At first, Lindsay hesitated. She disliked the idea of exposing her life to the public, but Emily was persuasive. "You're not asking for charity, Lindsay. You're giving people the chance to help someone who genuinely needs it. And maybe your story will inspire others not to give up." After weeks of preparation, the campaign was launched. Emily crafted a powerful narrative about Lindsay, her struggle with a debilitating disease, her husband's abandonment, and her resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. Accompanied by photos of Lindsay from different moments in her life, the appeal was heartfelt and compelling. The response was almost immediate. The story went viral. Strangers from all over began sharing the post, leaving supportive comments and making donations. The initial fundraising goal was met in just a week, and the contributions kept pouring in. One message in particular caught Emily and Lindsay's attention. A renowned doctor from Chicago, an expert in Lindsay's autoimmune condition, offered to treat her free of charge. It was an opportunity that felt like a miracle. Lindsay, still in disbelief over what was happening, began to feel something she hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. For the first time, there seemed to be a way forward, a chance to leave behind not only the pain of abandonment, but also the crushing challenges of her illness. As the lights of Indianapolis glimmered outside her window, Lindsay gazed at them with a new perspective. Something inside her was changing. She didn't yet know how, but she was determined to turn her pain into something meaningful. Her internal battle was only beginning, but for the first time in months, she felt ready to fight. That night, Lindsay stood before the mirror studying her reflection closely. The tears were still there, but now something else had joined them. "If he can start over, so can I," she thought, feeling a renewed strength stirring within her. The next morning, Lindsay woke to her phone buzzing incessantly on the bedside table. Still groggy from a restless night, she picked it up and saw the screen flooded with notifications. The campaign Emily had created continued to gain traction, but one message stood out. It was from the Chicago doctor who had offered to help. He wanted to schedule an initial consultation as soon as possible. Despite her nerves, Lindsay felt a flicker of hope reignite. Perhaps this was the first step toward reclaiming her life. Emily insisted on accompanying Lindsay to Chicago. Her friend was a pillar of support throughout the journey, from organizing the trip to walking through the doors of Dr. Harris's office with her. He was a middle-aged man with a warm smile and a voice that radiated reassurance. After reviewing Lindsay's medical reports and conducting a thorough examination, he explained her treatment options with cautious optimism. The road ahead would be difficult, but he believed there was a good chance of significantly improving her quality of life. When Lindsay left the office, she took a deep breath for the first time in a long while. It wasn't just the diagnosis or the treatment plan that moved her. It was the fact that someone believed in her. Returning to Indianapolis brought a mix of anxiety and renewal. Lindsay still had to grapple with the echoes of Isaiah's betrayal. Every piece of news or stray comment about him reopened wounds, and the pain of abandonment continued to haunt her. One evening, while scrolling through social media, she stumbled upon a post from Vanessa. The young woman was smiling beside Isaiah, flaunting a seemingly perfect life. The caption read something like, "Building our future together," and the impact of that image hit Lindsay like a sudden blow. Her smile vanished, replaced by a storm of anger and sadness. The next morning, Lindsay resolved to channel that energy into action. She reached out to Emily and proposed attending a meeting of the local support group they occasionally visited. There, she encountered others facing similar struggles, each with their own story of resilience. Sharing her experiences, Lindsay realized her pain wasn't unique. For the first time, she found strength in vulnerability, and the support she received was more powerful than any motivational speech she'd ever heard. Days turned into weeks, and Lindsay threw herself into the treatment Dr. Harris had outlined. It was grueling and required a discipline that often felt impossible, but she persevered. The progress was slow but noticeable. Gradually, she felt less fatigue during simple tasks and observed a slight improvement in her physical strength. The process was exhausting, but every small step forward was celebrated as a monumental victory. During one of these intense weeks, Lindsay received an unexpected phone call. It was from an old acquaintance she hadn't seen in years. The woman mentioned having seen the campaign online and wanted to reach out. Though the conversation was brief, the gesture was meaningful. Lindsay began to see how her story was impacting others, even people she barely knew. The thought made her reflect on something Emily had once said: "Sometimes your pain can be the bridge to someone else's hope." On a cold January morning, everything changed. Lindsay was leaving a routine appointment in Indianapolis when she saw Isaiah across the street. He was carrying shopping bags alongside Vanessa, who was laughing loudly while he appeared distracted. It was the first time she'd seen him in person since the night he asked for a divorce. Although she had expected to feel anger or resentment, what came over her was something entirely different, an overwhelming sense of emptiness. The man standing before her seemed like a stranger, a far cry from the person she had once loved. This realization was both devastating and liberating. Back in the safety of her home, Lindsay broke down, not because she still loved him, but because of the brutal clarity of the truth. He would never again be the person she thought she knew. It was time to let go of the past. Emily found her in that state and, without asking questions, simply embraced her. Her friend's presence was a reminder that Lindsay wasn't alone, even in her darkest moments. That night, as she stared at the ceiling in search of answers, Lindsay realized something needed to change in her story. She didn't want her life to be defined by abandonment or betrayal. She decided to use her experience to make a difference somehow. The idea was still vague, but her desire was clear. She wanted to help others who, like her, felt lost and broken. When Emily learned of Lindsay's decision, she was thrilled and immediately offered her help. Together, they began brainstorming ways to reach people in similar situations. The first step was organizing a small gathering to share stories of resilience. The event, held in Lindsay's living room, was intimate yet powerful. It was there that Lindsay found a renewed sense of purpose. In the months that followed, as she continued her treatment, Lindsay poured herself into this mission. She began working with local organizations that supported people facing chronic illnesses and social marginalization. Her home became a hub for discussions, mutual support, and, above all, hope. With each life she touched, Lindsay felt she was piecing together the parts of herself that had been shattered. One afternoon, while sorting through papers for a new project, she stumbled upon an old photo from her wedding with Isaiah. For a moment, her gaze lingered on the image, but this time there were no tears, only a quiet acceptance. Lindsay knew she couldn't change what had happened, but she also understood that her future didn't have to be an extension of that pain. With a deep breath, she tucked the photo away in a drawer and refocused on the present. Lindsay believed she was on the path to healing. Her involvement with the support group and her initiatives to help others had brought her an energy she hadn't felt in years. But the truth about pain is that it rarely disappears all at once. It returns in waves, unexpected and overwhelming, forcing you to confront ghosts you thought you had laid to rest. On a grey February afternoon, Lindsay received an envelope in the mail. The sender was Isaiah's lawyer, and she knew it could only mean one thing: the divorce papers. Her hands trembled as she opened it, and seeing Isaiah's full name next to hers brought a sharp ache to her chest. For years, she had believed that their joined names symbolized something eternal, something unbreakable. Now, these cold, formal documents shattered that illusion completely. She struggled to read the content, the words blurring in her mind. Isaiah had cited irreconcilable differences as the reason for the divorce. The phrase felt empty, almost insulting, considering the real context. He also relinquished any claim to the house, a gesture that, ironically, didn't feel generous, but rather like an attempt to sever the last tie he had to her. Lindsay stood frozen in the living room, the papers trembling in her hands. For a moment her breath came in short gasps, and the ticking of the clock on the wall grew deafening. Her vision blurred, and it felt as though the ground was slipping away beneath her feet. She sank onto the couch, trying to catch her breath, but the weight of reality was crushing. The truth was undeniable. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted with her life, had chosen to discard her entirely. In the days that followed, Lindsay fell into a state of apathy. Even the small victories she had achieved seemed insignificant in the face of this fresh wave of pain. Emily tried to help, but Lindsay pushed away even her closest friend. She spent hours lying on the couch, staring at the ceiling, unable to summon the energy to fight off the thoughts that haunted her. One night, in a search for distraction, Lindsay made the mistake of looking at Vanessa's social media profile. She knew she shouldn't, but morbid curiosity got the better of her. Vanessa had posted a new photo with Isaiah. They were at a tropical resort, smiling under a perfect blue sky. The caption read, "Building a life we love. Thank you for showing me the true meaning of happiness." The impact was like a punch to the stomach. Lindsay hurled her phone to the floor, hot tears streaming down her face. Anger bubbled within her, mixed with a suffocating sense of inadequacy. Vanessa was everything Lindsay was not. Young, healthy, full of energy. And Isaiah, who had once vowed to love her in sickness and in health, had chosen this idealized version of a perfect life over standing by her side. That night, Lindsay did something she hadn't done in years. She prayed. Sitting on her bed with her hands clasped, she spoke softly, her voice breaking with sobs. She asked for strength, for clarity, but most of all, for a reason to keep going. When she finished, she felt drained, but in some small way less alone. The next day, Emily showed up unexpectedly. Lindsay tried to send her away, but Emily refused to leave. "I know you want to be alone, but I'm not letting you do this to yourself. You're strong, Lindsay, even if you can't see it right now. You deserve more than to stay stuck in a life that someone else chose to leave." Emily's words struck Lindsay differently this time. Maybe it was the firm tone, or maybe she was just too tired to resist. For the first time in days, she let Emily help her leave the house. Emily took Lindsay to a local park. The February air was biting, but there was something comforting about feeling the wind on her face. As they walked slowly, Emily spoke about a charity event she was organizing to raise funds for a local shelter. "You should participate," Emily said enthusiastically. "Your story has inspired so many people. Imagine the impact you could have by sharing it at an event like this." Lindsay shook her head, uncertain. "I don't know if I'm ready for that." Emily stopped and looked at her, her eyes full of determination. "Maybe you'll never feel ready. But sometimes, the things that scare us the most are the ones we need to do the most." Emily's words echoed in Lindsay's mind as she returned home that evening. Maybe she was right. Perhaps the only way to break free from the spiral of pain was to find a greater purpose, something that would allow her to look beyond herself. That same night, Lindsay began to write. She pulled out a notebook that had been gathering dust on a shelf and started pouring her thoughts onto its pages. She wrote about the betrayal, the pain, but also about the small sparks of hope that had appeared in unexpected moments. The words flowed freely, and for the first time in a long while, she felt genuine relief. The days that followed brought small but meaningful progress. Lindsay began going out more, reconnecting with the support group, and even considering Emily's suggestion to speak at the event. There were still moments of struggle, times when the pain felt unbearable, but she now had something to hold on to, the belief that she could find meaning even in adversity. When the day of the event finally arrived, Lindsay was paralyzed with nerves. Emily encouraged her, holding her hand as they waited backstage. When it was her turn to speak, Lindsay walked up to the stage and, for a brief moment, considered retreating. But then she looked at the audience and saw the faces of people who, like her, carried their own burdens. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger as she continued. Lindsay shared her story about the abandonment, the illness, and the strength she'd found in herself and in the people around her. When she finished, the room was silent for a moment before erupting in applause. That night, as she headed home, Lindsay felt something she hadn't in a long time: pride. The pain was still there, but now it was accompanied by a new feeling of accomplishment. For the first time, she started to believe she wasn't defined by what she had lost, but by what she was rebuilding. Yet even as she felt empowered, Lindsay knew the journey ahead would still be long and challenging. She was ready to face it one step at a time. The next morning, Lindsay awoke with a clarity she hadn't felt in months. Sitting at her kitchen table with a warm cup of tea in her hands, she gazed out the window, watching the sun's timid rays glint off the snow. The cold Indianapolis winter was still harsh, but inside, Lindsay felt a new warmth. For the first time in months, she began imagining what she could build instead of mourning what she had lost. After Emily's charity event, something shifted in Lindsay. Sharing her story with such a receptive audience opened her eyes to a truth she had resisted for so long. Her pain had a purpose. She was no longer just a woman abandoned by a selfish husband. She was a survivor with something valuable to offer the world. Determined to move forward, she began crafting a plan to transform her life and, in the process, the lives of others. The first step was to focus on her health consistently. The treatment with Dr. Harris was yielding results, but it required commitment. Lindsay carefully revised her routine, incorporating the light exercises he recommended and adjusting her diet with the help of a nutritionist. Each small achievement, a longer walk, a pain-free morning, became a milestone she celebrated as part of her recovery. At the same time, Lindsay returned to the support group that had embraced her months before. This time, she wasn't just there to listen, she was there to help. Her story, shared with vulnerability and honesty, began to inspire other members of the group. People who once barely noticed her now sought her advice or simply a comforting word. Lindsay realized that by supporting others, she was also strengthening herself. During one of these meetings, an idea emerged that would change her life. A young woman named Carla, recently diagnosed with a similar autoimmune disease, shared how isolated and resourceless she felt in coping with her condition. Her words struck a deep chord with Lindsay, who knew exactly what that hopelessness felt like. That night, Lindsay went home determined to create something tangible for people like Carla. With Emily's help, Lindsay began planning a community organization for people with chronic illnesses and their caregivers. The concept was simple: to provide a space where they could share experiences, access resources, and most importantly, feel less alone. Emily's boundless energy was instrumental in the initial logistics, helping Lindsay draft a detailed plan for fundraising and building partnerships with doctors, therapists, and nutritionists. Challenges quickly arose. Lindsay still faced physical limitations and balancing work, treatment, and planning. The organization was exhausting. There were nights she cried out of frustration, questioning whether she had taken on more than she could handle. But every time she stumbled, Emily was there to remind her of how far she'd come, and Lindsay wasn't about to stop now. The first meetings of Lindsay's organization were held in her own living room. They were simple gatherings but profoundly meaningful. People of all ages and backgrounds began to attend, each carrying their own story of struggle. Some were facing a recent diagnosis, others were caregivers for ill family members, and even healthcare professionals eager to offer their expertise. The space quickly became a refuge for those who, like Lindsay, needed support. As the project grew, Lindsay began to dream of a larger future for her initiative. She envisioned transforming the small group into something more structured, with resources for alternative treatments, workshops, and educational events. But achieving that vision required significant funding. That's when Emily suggested organizing a large-scale community campaign. The idea was to host a public event that would bring people from across the city together to raise funds and spread awareness about the challenges faced by those living with chronic illnesses. Lindsay, though hesitant at first, knew it was a necessary step. Planning an event of that magnitude felt intimidating, but she resolved to take on the challenge. As Lindsay worked tirelessly on the event, she noticed a shift within herself. The thoughts of Isaiah, which had once consumed her, began to fade. He was still a distant presence in her memory, but his weight on her emotions had lessened. By focusing on helping others, Lindsay was rebuilding the parts of herself that he had broken. The day of the event arrived and Lindsay was nervous but proud. The venue, a transformed community school, buzzed with activity. There were tables with health information, an area for alternative therapies, and even a small stage where experts and patients shared their stories. Wearing a simple blue dress, Lindsay felt more confident than she had in years. As she walked through the space, speaking with participants and absorbing the positive energy that filled the air, Lindsay was overwhelmed with emotion. This was the result of months of hard work, but also of years of pain. Every smile she saw and every story she heard was proof that her suffering had not been in vain. When Lindsay stepped onto the stage to close the event, the audience, composed of patients, caregivers, and community members, greeted her with warm applause. With a steady yet emotional voice, she thanked everyone for their presence and shared more of her journey. She spoke about what she had lost, but also about what she had gained: strength, purpose, and a redefined sense of love. That evening, as she helped clean up the space, Lindsay paused for a moment to take in the empty room. She felt exhausted, yet fulfilled. The road ahead was still long, but for the first time in years, she fully believed she could walk it. Lindsay knew her journey was far from over, but now she had a plan, a clear vision of who she wanted to be and the impact she wanted to leave on the world. Most importantly, she was building a life that finally made sense to her. The months following the event marked a period of intense growth and challenges for Lindsay. The organization she had founded was beginning to take shape, bringing new responsibilities and demands. Lindsay threw herself into meetings, planning, and collaborations with other community groups, feeling more alive than she had in years. But as her dedication to the project grew, her body began to show signs of strain. The long hours and constant pressure were taking their toll. Though her treatment was still effective, Lindsay noticed the return of frequent exhaustion and aches she thought she had left behind. During a routine checkup, Dr. Harris was candid. "Lindsay, you're making incredible progress, but you need to remember that your body is still recovering. If you keep pushing at this pace, you risk a significant setback." His words echoed in her mind for days. She knew he was right, but how could she slow down when so many people were counting on her? Every email she received, every message of gratitude or plea for help, reinforced the feeling that her work was indispensable. In the midst of this whirlwind, Lindsay's life took an unexpected turn. One afternoon, while organizing materials for a new program at the community center, her phone rang. The name on the screen made her heart race. Isaiah. She froze, unsure whether to answer. After a few rings, she let the phone fall onto the table, ignoring the call. But she couldn't stop thinking about it. What could Isaiah possibly want after all this time? She had worked so hard to distance herself emotionally from his memory, but that call brought everything rushing back. Over the following days, Isaiah continued trying to reach her, sending messages she initially ignored. Finally, when he sent a short text saying he needed to talk about something important, Lindsay reluctantly agreed to meet. They arranged to meet at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. When Lindsay arrived, she saw Isaiah already seated at a corner table. He looked different, thinner, more tired, with dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, she almost felt pity for him, but the memory of his betrayal kept her grounded. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly as she sat down. "What do you want, Isaiah?" Lindsay asked bluntly. He hesitated, looking down at his hands for a moment before raising his gaze. "I know I'm the last person who should be asking you for anything, but I'm in a difficult situation." Lindsay crossed her arms, waiting for him to continue. Isaiah took a deep breath before speaking. "Vanessa left me. She emptied my bank account and disappeared as soon as she found out." He paused, as if the words were too heavy to say. "As soon as she found out I'm sick." A chill ran down Lindsay's spine. No matter how much distance she had tried to put between them, Isaiah's words still had the power to pierce her. "Sick?" she asked, her voice slightly softer. Isaiah, with difficulty, explained that he had been diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer. He was undergoing treatment, but the prognosis was grim. He had no one else to turn to. The friends he thought he could count on had vanished along with the money Vanessa had taken, and he couldn't handle everything on his own. Lindsay sat in silence, processing what she had just heard. Part of her wanted to stand up and leave, letting Isaiah face the consequences of his own choices. After all, he had done the same to her. But another part, a more compassionate part, remembered the man he had been before everything fell apart. "What exactly do you expect me to do?" she finally asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't know," Isaiah admitted. "I just needed to talk to someone." The cafe fell silent between them, the tension almost tangible. Lindsay fought against the storm of emotions building inside her. She felt anger, pain, and an inexplicable sense of responsibility. "I'll think about what you've told me," she said at last, standing up. "But don't expect anything from me, Isaiah. You made your choice." As she left the cafe, Lindsay felt a weight pressing on her chest. The conversation with Isaiah had reopened wounds she thought were healed. Over the following days, she couldn't stop thinking about the encounter. She felt torn. Part of her wanted to help, while another part reminded her that he didn't deserve anything beyond what he was already facing. Emily noticed something was wrong and insisted Lindsay share what was troubling her. When Lindsay told her about Isaiah, Emily's reaction was a mix of surprise and indignation. "He left you at the worst moment of your life, and now he wants your help? Lindsay, you don't owe him anything." "I know," Lindsay replied, shaking her head. But that doesn't mean I can just ignore what's happening. The words lingered between them. Emily didn't push further, but it was clear she didn't approve of Lindsay getting involved in Isaiah's life again. That night, Lindsay spent hours tossing and turning in bed, her mind wrestling with conflicting emotions. She remembered the nights she cried alone, the pain of being rejected by someone who had promised to love her. But she also remembered the people who had shown up to help her when she needed it most. Finally, she made a decision. She wasn't sure if it was the right one, but something inside her wouldn't let her turn her back completely. The next morning, she sent Isaiah a message. "I'll help, but under clear conditions. I'm not doing this for you, but because I believe everyone deserves dignity, even when they've made mistakes. Don't disappoint me." Isaiah's response was almost immediate, filled with gratitude. But Lindsay knew the road ahead would be complicated. Her decision was more than just an act of compassion. It was a test of her own limits, of how far she was willing to go to remain true to her values. As she prepared to face what was coming, Lindsay felt like she was entering a new phase of her journey, one where she would have to confront not only Isaiah's choices, but also the shadows she still carried within herself. Helping Isaiah proved to be an emotional challenge Lindsay could never have anticipated. Her first visit to the hospital where he was admitted felt like a punch to the gut. Isaiah, once so confident and full of himself, was now a shadow of the man she had known. He was thin, with a pale face and hollow cheeks. His head, once neatly groomed, was now completely bald. He looked older, as though the years had ravaged him in just a few months. As she entered the room, Lindsay felt a heaviness in her chest. Isaiah looked at her with tired eyes, but there was something in his expression she didn't recognize: vulnerability. "You came," he said weakly. Lindsay nodded, unsure of what to say. This wasn't the kind of meeting she could have imagined, even in the worst moments after their divorce. The first few days were hard. Lindsay split her time between her responsibilities with the organization and her visits to Isaiah, which drained her emotionally. He needed help with basic tasks, and the nurses didn't have the time to meet all his needs. Lindsay began helping where she could, bringing meals, speaking with his doctors, and trying to reorganize his medical bills, which he had no way to pay. During one visit, Isaiah tried to thank her, but his words struck a nerve. "I know I was horrible to you, Lindsay. I don't deserve any of this." She cut him off before he could continue. "I'm not here to hear apologies or to justify what happened. I'm here because I believe no one deserves to go through this alone, Isaiah. But don't mistake this for forgiveness." Her words were harsh but necessary. She didn't want him to think her help was a sign that the past was forgotten. Isaiah didn't respond. He just stared at the ceiling, as though silently accepting her reprimand. He hesitated, staring at his hands for a moment before raising his eyes. "I know I'm the last person who should ask you for anything, but I'm in a difficult situation." Lindsay crossed her arms, waiting for him to continue. Isaiah took a deep breath. "Vanessa left me. She emptied my bank account and disappeared as soon as she found out." He paused, the words heavy. "As soon as she found out I'm sick." A chill ran down Lindsay's spine. Despite everything, Isaiah's words still had the power to shake her. "Sick?" she asked, her voice slightly softer. Isaiah explained with difficulty that he had been diagnosed with advanced stomach cancer. He was undergoing treatment, but his prognosis wasn't good. He had no one else to turn to. His friends had vanished, along with the money Vanessa took, and he couldn't handle everything on his own. Lindsay processed his words in silence. Part of her wanted to walk away, letting him face the consequences of his choices alone. After all, he had abandoned her when she needed him most. But another part, a more compassionate one, remembered the man he had been before everything fell apart. "What exactly do you expect me to do?" she asked finally, trying to keep her voice steady. "I don't know," Isaiah admitted. "I just needed to talk to someone." The cafe fell into silence, the tension between them almost palpable. Lindsay fought the emotions swirling inside her, anger, pain, and a strange sense of responsibility. "I'll think about what you've told me," she said, standing. "But don't expect anything from me, Isaiah. You made your choice." As she left the cafe, Lindsay felt the weight of the conversation pressing on her chest. The meeting had reopened wounds she thought were closed. Days later, she still couldn't shake the memory. Torn between her desire to help and her resentment, she confided in Emily. Emily's response was swift and indignant. He abandoned you at your lowest and now expects your help. Lindsay, you owe him nothing." "I know," Lindsay said, shaking her head. "But I can't just ignore this." Emily frowned but said nothing more, though her disapproval was clear. That night, unable to sleep, Lindsay reflected deeply. Isaiah's apology replayed in her mind, as did the truth. She couldn't change what had happened, but she could decide what to do now. The next morning, she sent Isaiah a message. "I'll help, but on clear terms. I'm not doing this for you, but because I believe everyone deserves dignity, even when they've failed. Don't disappoint me." Isaiah's gratitude was immediate, but Lindsay knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Her choice wasn't just about compassion, it was a test of her own strength and values. Her first visit to the hospital was overwhelming. Isaiah, once confident and proud, was now frail and unrecognizable. His gaunt face and hollow eyes made him seem like a shadow of himself. Lindsay's chest tightened as she stepped into the room, but she forced herself forward. "You came," Isaiah said weakly. Lindsay nodded but couldn't bring herself to respond. She hadn't imagined she'd ever see him like this. Days turned into weeks. Lindsay balanced her responsibilities with the organization and her hospital visits, which drained her emotionally. Isaiah, frustrated and embittered by his condition, was often difficult. One day she found him lashing out at nurses and even at her. "I don't need you to do everything for me," he snapped weakly, brushing her hand aside as she adjusted his pillows. Lindsay's patience finally broke. "You don't need me," she said, her voice shaking. "Then who do you think is here for you when everyone else has abandoned you?" Isaiah closed his eyes, as though her words were too much to bear. "I know," he murmured. But Lindsay wasn't finished. "You left me when I was at my most vulnerable. You chose a life of convenience and pleasure over your promises. And now you expect me to just forget that?" Tears streamed down her face as she spoke, all the pain and anger she had buried rising to the surface. "I wanted to hate you, Isaiah. I wanted you to feel every ounce of the pain I felt. But you know what hurts the most? It's not what you did to me. It's seeing you like this and realizing that even now part of me still cares." The room fell silent. Lindsay turned to leave, unable to look at him any longer. But before she reached the door, Isaiah's frail voice stopped her. "I know I don't deserve your kindness, Lindsay. I have no excuse for what I did. But I'm sorry, truly sorry." She didn't reply. She left the room, tears still streaming, feeling utterly drained. For days, Lindsay avoided the hospital, needing space to process what had happened. Emily tried to comfort her, but Lindsay remained lost in thought. One sleepless night, she realized the truth. Nothing Isaiah could say or do would change the past. What mattered now was how she chose to move forward. The next morning, Lindsay returned to the hospital. Isaiah looked even more fragile than before, his breath shallow and uneven. His eyes fluttered open when she entered, and he gazed at her with faint recognition. "I didn't think you'd come back," he said in a whisper. Lindsay sat beside him, taking his cold hand in hers. "I'm not sure I can fully forgive you, Isaiah," she said softly, "but I won't let you face this alone." Isaiah's hand weakly squeezed hers, a single tear sliding down his cheek. It was a simple gesture, but it carried a weight words couldn't. As Lindsay looked at him, she felt a shift within herself. She wasn't there just to help Isaiah. She was there to release herself from the pain he had caused, to prove she was stronger than the scars she carried. That morning felt different. The sunlight filtered through the dense clouds over Indianapolis, casting a faint glow through the hospital windows. Lindsay knew Isaiah's time was short. The doctor had been clear the day before. He had days, perhaps hours. Walking through the sterile corridors, Lindsay's heart was heavy but her mind was calm. There was something she needed to do, something she couldn't leave unfinished. Entering the room, she found Isaiah barely breathing, his frail figure almost swallowed by the bed. His eyes opened slowly at the sound of her steps. She sat beside him, holding his hand once more. "I'm here," she said softly. Isaiah tried to smile, though it barely formed on his lips. "I thought you wouldn't come back," he whispered. Lindsay took a deep breath, her emotions welling up. "I didn't know if I could," she admitted, "but I'm here." The silence between them was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Lindsay observed him, the man she had loved and hated in equal measure. His frailty reminded her of life's impermanence. Anger and resentment seemed insignificant against the inevitability of death. "I can't undo what I did," Isaiah said faintly, "but Knowing you're here now means more than I can say." Lindsay closed her eyes, holding back tears. "It hasn't been easy, Isaiah, not for a second." He nodded weakly, as if he understood. She gripped his hand more firmly, trying to convey what words couldn't. "For so long I waited for an apology, for you to acknowledge what you did. But now I see I don't need that to move on. I'm not here for you, Isaiah. I'm here for me." Tears welled in his eyes, one slipping down his weathered face. Lindsay felt her throat tighten, but she pressed on. "Despite everything, I choose to forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve it. Carrying this pain won't take me anywhere." The room fell silent again, broken only by the irregular sound of Isaiah's breathing. He closed his eyes, a faint smile crossing his face. "Thank you," he murmured so softly that Lindsay barely heard him. She stayed by his side for hours, holding his hand as he drifted in and out of fragile sleep. The medical staff came and went, checking his vitals and adjusting medications. Each time Lindsay asked, the answer was the same. He was near the end. As night fell, Lindsay felt an overwhelming fatigue, but she refused to leave. At some point, while watching Isaiah sleep, memories of their life together surfaced. There had been good moments when she believed nothing could tear them apart. Those moments, though distant, were still part of who she was. Isaiah opened his eyes again, his breathing slower than ever. He looked at Lindsay with a clarity she hadn't expected. "You were the best part of my life, and I didn't see it." Tears streamed down Lindsay's face, and this time she didn't try to stop them. "It doesn't matter anymore, Isaiah." He closed his eyes again, giving her hand a gentle squeeze before it relaxed. His breathing grew weaker, and Lindsay knew the moment was near. She began murmuring words of comfort, unsure if he could hear her. "You're at peace now. It's going to be okay." Minutes later, Isaiah took his final breath. The monitor beside his bed emitted a continuous tone, and Lindsay knew he was gone. The room fell into an absolute stillness, and Lindsay felt the weight of a chapter that had finally come to an end. She allowed herself to cry, not just for Isaiah, but for everything she had lost, for everything she had endured, and for everything still to come. After some time she stood, glanced at him one last time, and left the room. As she walked through the hospital's sterile corridors, she felt something unexpected. Relief. It wasn't a celebration of his death, but a sense that something within her had been resolved. That night, Lindsay stepped out of the hospital under a starry Indianapolis sky. The cold night air brushed against her face, and for the first time in years, she took a deep breath. It wasn't the ending she had imagined, but it was the closure she needed. She knew life would go on and that there was still much to do, but for that moment, she allowed herself to simply feel sadness, relief, and, most importantly, freedom. The days following Isaiah's death blurred together for Lindsay. Though she had emotionally prepared herself, there was an undeniable emptiness left by the experience. The news of his passing caused little reaction among acquaintances or former colleagues. It was a bitter irony. Isaiah, who had once chosen freedom and pleasure over responsibility, now left the world with barely a ripple. After a small, quiet funeral, Lindsay returned home. She sat on the couch, watching the golden sunset fill the room with light. That house, once a symbol of love and commitment, was now a space of renewal. For hours she sat there, revisiting memories but refusing to let sadness dominate her. For the first time, she could think about Isaiah without being consumed by pain. In the days that followed, Lindsay immersed herself in her work with the organization. Her dedication became even stronger, though this time it wasn't an escape from her pain, but a reflection of her resilience. Each person who contacted the organization, each story she heard, reminded her why she had chosen to keep going. One morning, while reviewing reports and preparing materials for an upcoming event, Lindsay received a message from Emily. "Hey, Lindsay, I have something for you. Can I stop by?" Soon after, Emily arrived with a small box in her hands. Her expression was serious yet encouraging. "I found this while helping clear out Isaiah's belongings at the hospital. I thought you should have it." Lindsay looked at the box with curiosity and hesitation. She opened it slowly, revealing a worn leather notebook. Flipping through its pages, she realized it was a diary. The first entries were scattered thoughts, but as she read on, the words became more coherent. It was Isaiah's account of his final months. He wrote about his illness, Vanessa's betrayal, and his profound loneliness. But what struck Lindsay most were the passages about her. "I ruined everything. I lost the only person who truly cared about me. Lindsay showed me more compassion than I deserved. I may not live long enough to tell her, but I hope she knows how much I regret what I did. I hope she finds the happiness I couldn't give her." Lindsay closed the journal, her chest tight. She wasn't sure what to feel: sadness, relief, or an odd sense of peace. Isaiah's words were late, but they mattered. In some way, they validated her decision to forgive him. In the weeks that followed, Lindsay used the experience to fuel her mission. During organization meetings, she began sharing parts of her story more openly, emphasizing the importance of forgiveness, not for others, but for oneself. Each time she spoke, she felt stronger and more confident that she was on the right path. One day, while visiting a shelter to discuss a partnership, Lindsay saw Jake, a man she had helped months before. He looked healthier, his face brighter. When he spotted her, he broke into a wide smile and rushed to thank her. "You saved my life, Lindsay. I'll never forget what you did for me." Those words moved Lindsay deeply. Seeing the direct impact of her work was a reward beyond money or recognition. One quiet evening, Lindsay sat down to write. She picked up a fresh notebook and began documenting her journey, from the dark days after the divorce to the moments of transformation and forgiveness. The words flowed, and as she reread what she had written, she realized she had closed a chapter. Her story was no longer one of pain, but of resilience, strength, and purpose. The changes in Lindsay did not go unnoticed. Her friends, especially Emily, remarked on how radiant and confident she had become. "You're different, Lindsay," Emily said one afternoon. "It's like you've finally found your place in the world." Lindsay smiled, recognizing the truth in her friend's words. "I think I have. And you know, I wouldn't have made it here without people like you by my side." The days continued, and Lindsay embraced her new reality with gratitude. She still carried the scars of her journey, but now saw them as reminders of what she had overcome. Indianapolis, with its familiar streets and welcoming community, had become the backdrop of her transformation. One afternoon, while walking through the park where Emily had taken her months ago, Lindsay paused to observe the trees. Their once bare, desolate branches were now covered in vibrant green leaves. The cycle of the seasons continued, and like nature, Lindsay had found a new life. That evening, she returned home with a sense of fulfillment. She knew her story didn't end here, but she was ready for whatever lay ahead. The impact of her choices, her work, and her capacity to forgive would echo for a long time. Above all, Lindsay knew that no matter what the future brought, she had the strength to face it. The morning sun shone brightly, bathing the broad Ripple neighborhood of Indianapolis in a soft golden light. Lindsay Carter woke early, as she did every day, to prepare for a routine she had grown to cherish. The house, once a symbol of pain and isolation, was now a place of warmth and life. Its walls held stories of resilience and growth, and every corner seemed to hum with the energy of who Lindsay had become. In the kitchen, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as Lindsay checked her to-do list on her tablet. She had a meeting with a new medical team interested in supporting her organization, followed by a lecture at a local school on empathy and mental health. Each item on the list was a testament to the purpose she had found, a purpose born from transforming her pain into something powerful. Over the 3 years since Isaiah's death, Lindsay had become a respected figure in her community. Her organization, officially named Bridges of Hope, had grown exponentially, helping hundreds of people in Indianapolis and beyond. The small gatherings in her living room had evolved into a vibrant community center, with programs for patients, caregivers, and healthcare professionals. As she prepared materials for her lecture, Lindsay's phone buzzed on the counter. It was Emily. "Good morning, busy boss," Emily teased in her always cheerful tone. "Ready to be the star of the day?" Lindsay laughed, still surprised by the lightness she had found in her life. "I don't know about a star, but I'm ready to share what I've learned." "You're already a star to so many people, Lindsay, don't forget that." Lindsay ended the call with a smile and finished getting ready. She chose a simple but elegant blue blazer that reflected her personality, strong yet approachable. Before leaving, she pinned a small star-shaped brooch, a gift from Emily, onto her pocket. The event at the local school was a success. Lindsay spoke to a room filled with students and teachers about how challenges could become opportunities. She shared parts of her story, avoiding the most painful details but emphasizing the lessons she had learned. "We can't always choose what happens to us," she said, her eyes shining as she looked at the audience. But we can choose how we respond. Forgiveness, empathy, and the courage to move forward are powerful tools. When she finished, the room erupted in applause. Some students approached to ask questions, while others simply thanked her. One young girl, in particular, touched Lindsay's heart. "I have a chronic condition, and sometimes I feel like I'll never have a normal life," the girl said, her eyes glistening with tears. "Thank you for showing me that it's possible to find purpose even in pain." Lindsay held the girl's hands, offering a warm smile. "You're not alone, and I promise you the pain will never be greater than your ability to overcome it." As she left the school, Lindsay felt the warmth of the sun on her face and took a deep breath, grateful for the journey she had traveled. On her way home, she decided to stop by the community center. When she arrived, a group of volunteers, many of whom had become like a second family, greeted her enthusiastically. "Lindsay, we need your opinion on the new fundraising campaign," one of them said, rushing over with a tablet. She smiled and followed the group into one of the rooms. As she listened to their ideas and offered suggestions, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. The people around her were living proof that no one had to face difficulties alone. Her organization wasn't just a job, it was her legacy. Later that evening, back in the comfort of her home, Lindsay sat in her favorite armchair with a cup of tea and opened the journal where she continued to record her thoughts. She picked up her pen and wrote, "Today, as I spoke to those young people, I realized something I might have known but had never said out loud. My pain does not define me. It shaped who I am, but who I am now is the result of the choices I made after it. Forgiveness isn't easy, but it is freeing. I've learned that letting go of the past doesn't mean forgetting. It means making room for the future. I chose to live. I chose to love again, to love life, to love the people around me, and most importantly, to love myself." As she wrote, she felt a profound peace. It wasn't the kind of peace that comes from the absence of challenges, but the kind that comes from knowing you're on the right path. That night, as she prepared for bed, Lindsay looked out her window and saw the city lights shining in the distance. They were a reminder that even in darkness, there are always points of light to guide you. With that thought, she allowed herself to close her eyes, ready to face tomorrow with the same courage that had carried her through every step of her journey. Lindsay knew her story didn't end here. There was still so much to do, many lives to touch, and countless dreams to fulfill. But in that moment, she was exactly where she needed to be, and that was enough. What about you? If you were in Lindsay's place and had the chance to forgive someone who caused you the greatest pain of your life, would you do it for them or for yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments. We want to hear what you think about the power of forgiveness and how it can transform lives. If you missed our last story, here's what happened. During a lavish wedding in Los Angeles, a homeless woman ran into the venue, pointed an accusing finger at the groom, and shouted words that left everyone frozen in place. "He's my husband." In the midst of shock and silence, a dark truth threatened to surface, and nothing would ever be the same. Click on the video now to find out everything that happened in this gripping tale. See you there.